Welcome back, travelers, to Legendary Lore, where today we are going to be jumping straight into New Capenna. We're not going to be doing a card-by-card like legendaries that aren't shown in the story because it hasn't come out yet. At the point of the time when we're recording right now, we waited until all the cards came out so that we have the proper images to show for characters, and now we're going to be going through them. So first up, we're talking about a guy named Perrie. Yes, Perrie. He's not a platypus, he's a giant rhino man. And so basically he's working for the brokers being the Bant-aligned group. Our story starts off with Perrie basically talking about the fact that everyone sees a giant rhino monster man and think, oh, he's the muscle. He's just a really big, dumb brute. Not realizing that he's actually really, really smart. I mean, he literally, and if you look at his artwork, he has a monocle. That pretty much automatically is like, okay, this is a smart guy. He's got a monocle. He knows what he's doing with all this. Well, it turns out that as he's going through the story, he's basically on a job. And as a member of one of the brokers, he's an enforcer who's supposed to go and he finds a person who's broken a contract or whatever, and then he breaks something on them. Pretty simple stuff. And so the problem is that he himself has broken the contract. We learn over the course of the story that there was a kid that he chose not to hurt and or kill, because the kid basically got caught up in stuff and should have basically been dealt with by the brokers, but this guy Perrie didn't do that, and instead you see that now he's basically lost his cred, and there's these two Leonin that are basically watching him. And it's great because you kind of get an idea, because they say you got, well, they basically tell him, okay, there's this, there's that, okay, yeah, we're gonna beat you up if you do anything wrong. He goes, don't mind me, I'm just going on my own. And he's allowed through. Perrie, like, he's given the green light by one of the elves, like, hey, it's fine, don't worry about him, you can go. And all he says, Perrie, after everything has gone by and he's going to just go right through him, he'll be fine, nothing's going to happen, he turns to one of the Leonin and he says, good kitty. It then cuts to him in the back of the alley across from the lounge, and he's basically he's just there, and everything's broken, and he's like, he got in a fight. And what's cool is you get this one little moment where he pats in the inner coat of his pocket, and he sees that his shattered pocket watch is there that he had since his boxing days. So we get a little bit of a look into like what must have been like in his past. This guy's a bruiser, he's a brawler, but he's smart and he knows what he's doing, and that's what's kind of weird. We're introduced at this point to another Leonin, this one in a pinstripe vest and very stylish, and his name is Rigo. I believe in the original version of the story, because the story actually got edited after it was released, Rigo was female, and after the release of the card, I believe, it was changed to male. So he, Rigo, is basically like another member of the brokers, and one of the right hands to the leader, Falco. So Rigo is basically telling him, hey, forget the job you're on, the boss wants to see you. And obviously, if the boss, who's a giant bird demon, wants to see you, you're gonna go. The problem for Perrie, though, is that he did break that rule. He did break that law. He broke a contract by not offing the kid. So now he's gonna go, and he's going to meet Falco. So Falco's a pretty imposing boss. He's just giant wings, super long curved horns that just shoved out of his head. And he stands essentially over a balcony, and he's known, this is a Bant mob boss that is known for throwing people off his balcony if he's not happy with them. And the way he describes it, because he's talking to Perrie, the way he describes it essentially is sometimes people, they fall, they're so impressed by the sights that they just happen to fall off of the balcony. It's a really terrible mistake and accident, but it happens from time to time. But Falco tells him, I have a job for you. And of course, for Perrie, this could be his big shot. This could be his opportunity to not be dead. Because if he's like kicked out of the brokers for his mistakes, or his decisions, then he's basically going to be sitting there loose. He's roughed up a bunch of people. Plenty of people would want a shot at him. So if he's out of the brokers, that means that he's basically dead. And that's if Falco doesn't just straight up kill him, like I said. So here we actually have Falco kind of explain things. And he says, have you seen what happens to a plane where order falls apart, Perry? And then Perry even says he didn't know what he was signing. He was a child. And he goes, well, the child sells newspapers across the major Obscura meeting point. So they know that the Obscura, where they basically had set the kid up as a spy. And that was the main thing that we find out from that. Going forward, Perry winds up being paired up with Kroos, which is it's funny that his name is Kroos because I think of Agrus Kos from Ravnica, but obviously it's not them. Kroos instead is another member of the brokers, and Kroos is like the one of the main broker characters. And this guy, he's got it all figured out. He's another Leonin, because there's a lot of Leonins in the brokers, and he basically is able to create these like shields, and he's able to do all kinds of magic, and he's just generally really good at what he does. He knows how to do really strong mind magic, and he's the kind of guy that's really proud of himself, really kind of like he thinks he's the best person, smartest person in the room. And so we actually have this moment where Perry can feel and like can sense that Kroos is in a corner, and he's trying to like sneak up and like make his grand entrance, and before Kroos can actually say it, he's like, hello Kroos, let's go. And he's like, okay, fine, forget you, I'll just go. And so what their mission essentially is to find a Rivedier. Rivediers, of course, being the Jund faction, the Jund crime family. And what they're going after is a demolitionist. Basically a person who's able to basically cause extreme destruction just by using their magic and cause all kinds of fantastic explosions. And so as they're going, Perry doesn't entirely trust Kroos, because Perry is, again, not known for their like sticking to the plan kind of thing due to the fact that they allowed that kid to live. And so Perry thinks that maybe they're going to get far, far away. He's going to kill him. Perry's going to be killed by Kroos, and then just kind of left there. But at the same time, Kroos can't entirely trust Perry because Perry did not follow the rules. And if you can't follow the rules, it's possible that you're going to just go off script again, and that's not good. So we have all of this happening, and Kroos is basically telling him, hey, drink some of this Halo, and you'll be a little bit stronger. You'll be ready for what's going on. Because she is a demolitionist. She's going to just wreck things. She's called the Plunder Queen. And so they go deeper and deeper beneath the landscape, because New Capenna is essentially this giant floating city. It's built on top of a giant like pillar. And so they're going lower and lower. They start going through Rivedier areas, and they keep going until eventually they're at the very bottom. They're actually on land. And as they get there, they're attacked by some raccoon folk, because the raccoon folk live in those areas, like basically in the backwoods of New Capenna. And they get through all of that, and we have this really cool fight after we see Kroos and Perry working together. And eventually we see them go up against this Rivedier. And she's just causing explosions. She makes this she knocks over this one piece of like wreckage wall that just collapses on top of Kroos, and he's like, oh no. And so Perry's able to kind of fight back, and the fact again that he's viewed as this giant brute makes it to where people don't really think of him as strategizing, but he does a lot of that. So during this fight with the Rivedier, they wind up, Perry and the Rivedier, they wind up basically hitting each other over and over again. By the way, the Rivetier's name is Jolene. She's actually another one of the characters. So Jolene and Perry, they're just going at it. They're punching each other, and Perry's got this giant hammer, and he basically tells her, look, we can both swing at the same time. We'll bring everything down around us. I'll be able to walk away because I'm a giant rhino man. Can you walk away? And Jolene thinks about it, and she's like, I'm going to do it anyways. And so she goes at him, but before she can actually start the fight, suddenly there's a wisp of a spell, and she's kind of put in a trance. She's caught off guard, and not Rigo, she's caught in a trance, and Kroos appears. And Kroos is like, oh, cool, I'm still alive, even though I was covered in all that rubble. Halo is fantastic for all that. And so he basically starts going through her brain, trying to find the information that he's looking for the specific thing. And he finds out, essentially, that the Obscura were working against them and had basically been planning this out. And the expectation is they wanted the Rivediers to think that the brokers were suppressing them. Because the Rivediers, they're set up in a way to where, if you were to compare them to like the real world thing, they're inspired by like the Teamsters, and they have the blue collar working class trying to go up against all of the problems of the government trying to bring them down. The brokers, of course, being basically crooked lawyers. So you have this tension already there, and then you have the Obscura, who you could think of as kind of either detectives or a CIA, FBI kind of corrupt force that are constantly getting all this misinformation across. So the Obscura are making the Rivediers think the brokers are going to start a war. At the same time, the brokers wanted to deal with Jolene and leave her body in front of the Rivediers so that they would see that they shouldn't mess with the brokers and break contracts. But that was planned by the Obscura so that they would start a turf war, and that would weaken both the Rivediers and it would weaken the brokers. And this was all planned out specifically by the Obscura. And now Perry and Kroos both realize that. And it's a big problem. Because either they do what they were told by their boss and start a turf war, or they disobey their boss and don't deal with her, and they take her back and they try to work everything out. It's basically they don't have a right move to make, because Falco is very specific with what he wants them to do. He says, do this, you do it. If you don't, then you're dead. In addition, if Perry doesn't do what he's supposed to do, he'll most likely get tossed immediately. And so Perry thinks about it, and he knows a lot of people will die if they start a war. A ton of them. And Falco is the kind of person that he would actually fight him. He'd do it. And Perry decides, you know what? I have to go. You stay here with Jolene. I'm gonna go, you stay here, you recover, you bring Jolene with you. I'm gonna go ahead to Falco and I'll try to explain everything. If you see my body pancaked across the pavement, you know it didn't go so well, but at least you have Jolene and you can continue with what you need to do. Because they couldn't all go together. Jolene was basically dead weight, and of course, Kroos was weakened by getting dunked on by a giant wall. So here we have Perry, and he's back at the broker's main area, and he's in front of a Falco, and he says, I see no plans, I see no Kroos. And then he turns and he goes, is Kroos alive? And Perry just tries to be like, okay, look, he's on his way back, he's got the Rivedier, everything's good, it's fine. And he goes, but there's no plans. And he goes, well, it's a trap. He says, you see, we could get the plans, but we can talk about the fact that somebody else got them, and you'd say it's the Obscura, and apparently Falco already knew. Falco already expected as much. But basically, despite all of this, Falco is not super upset like he was expecting to be. Instead, they're talking about how there is going to be a war. That they may have stopped it from coming now, but it is coming. The halo is running out. Halo, as you would later determine, is essentially, it's derived from stasis angels, which, as far as the story itself goes, they don't really explain the process of creating Halo, or where it comes from, or why it's running out exactly. They just know that it's becoming more scarce, and there's suddenly a new source of it, all this stuff like that. And apparently the new source is just as good as an actual angel. They don't really know why. We'll get to that at some point in the future. But basically, Falco is trying to explain to him that it's going to happen. Everything's going to fall apart. And when it does, he needs something more. He needs people on his side that he can depend on. And he says right here, if the child had done what I'd asked, you wouldn't have been down into the city getting made a fool of by the Obscura. If he'd done his job, we'd likely be a step ahead instead of stuck with a mess and possible bloodshed. And he says, and Perrie tells him, is it worth winning anything if you have to harm children to do it? Because it isn't to me. And Falco says, I have brawlers. I don't need more. And he says, and I have tacticians smarter than you, many of them. And Perrie then tells him, then use them. Perrie doesn't care at this point. He knows that he broke the rules. He knows he didn't do what Falco wanted on this one. He knows that anything that Falco tells him to do, if it's going to go against his ideologies, against his morality, then it's over. He's not going to do it. And it'll just be the same thing over again. And so that's why here, Falco says this to him after laughing. I need something different from you. I still need you to go see that boy for me. I still need you to protect broken reputations. Everything we built falls apart. And so basically Perrie is allowed to live. And you basically flash forward a bit and you see that Perrie is bringing this kid over to these, they're basically these, it describes him as a woman in an all black uniform. And she's basically a warden. It looks like she's leader of like an orphanage or something. And it doesn't really show what it is exactly. But he tells them it's basically this is a place for orphans. It's a school. He goes, I'll visit, I'll be by tomorrow. And the kid then gives him his flat cap. You know, the extra, read all about it caps that the kids would have. He takes his off and he gives it to Perrie. And now like it's a gift to him. And all these black dressed figures, they're around the kid. There's a flash of light and the kid is completely his mind is wiped essentially of everything from his past, and he won't remember a thing before today essentially. And as a result, Perrie basically saved this kid from being completely demolished by the brokers. He erased his entire past, he erased everything he was and left him with these people, but the kid's alive. He was able to find that middle ground for the brokers. And here we actually see him next to Falco. Falco was waiting in the car. He says, what I need right now, Perrie, is neither a brawler nor a planner. What I need is the conscience. And when I saw that, I thought that was so cool because this is the Bant color combination. This is the only color combination out of the four who has literally no demonic qualities, because black has had plenty of demons in its color wheel. It's literally like they're manifestations of black mana. And there have technically been several red demons. And of course the devils show up in red as well. But with Bant, there is none of that. And so seeing that their main conflict was that they had become too brutal, I thought was really cool. And seeing that we have essentially a giant, really smart rhino as our main guy in this story, that's brilliant to me as well, because you kind of get into the green side of things and the blue side of things, and they're mashed together, and then you have the white side of things with his conscience. You have the three elements there of the actual group, and that's just so good. Now I'm going to end the episode now because Joe's normally the one that closes it out, but he's currently looking into the families themselves from a more up close and personal position. So thank you guys for watching, and we will see you guys in the next episode, and until then, travel well.